Hey there, it's Shauna. I hope you're doing great and happy holidays to you. Happy end of the year. This is your weekly astrology forecast for the last week of 2017 for December 25th. And this week I'm calling Reframing Reality. So very appropriate for the end of the year and an interesting energy to end the year on because we will have opportunities to reframe how it is that we view our reality. So along with that, I'll have 3 tips for you to have an amazing week to end this year. So the first aspect that we have is we have Venus meeting with Saturn. So Venus will be conjunct Saturn in the sign of Capricorn. And this is kind of interesting. So I want to give you the full spectrum because Saturn typically gets a bad rap. If you Google things or read things about Saturn, it's typically kind of a negative tone, and especially when Venus comes into the mix. So let's break it down a little bit. So Venus is the sign of attraction, allure, love, relationships, sex, and luxuries. Basically, Venus is all the things that we enjoy. The things that we enjoy, the things that we're attracted to, or even repulsed by, and how that works within our relationship and our relationship to our values. And so Saturn, on the other hand, is about material reality. Saturn is about structure and foundation. Saturn can reflect where we have a certain element of limitation or boundary. Saturn, for this reason, has also been related to time because we only, in the material world, we only have so much time. There's a limit there. And so this, this can reflect a few different qualities. When there's love, relationships, beauty, harmony, all of that meets limitation, that might create a challenge. It might create a limitation where we feel limited within what it is that we're going to do. The other aspect of this is that this can just reflect a love for tradition because Saturn is traditional things, Venus is love, and so I think it's very perfect that this aspect is happening on Monday, on Christmas Day, if you celebrate Christmas Day, a perfect traditional just like this sweetness that comes from tradition and traditional things. And on a personal level, this aspect could represent where we're looking at what is sustainable in our lives, what is sustainable in our relationships, what is sustainable in our values, the people that we surround ourselves with. Do those people reflect our deep values and not even like our ideal values, but like the day-to-day and the life that we're creating for ourselves? Like how do the people in our lives fit into that, and how do we honor our values? And the general tone with this too is it's like a slow to warm kind of energy. So you may feel yourself feeling a little bit just more cautious or more hesitant when Saturn is around. There is a tendency to hold back a little bit more. And so I know all of this sounds a little bit somber, but I think it just depends on how you use the energy. And so this week I would really focus on where are you growing, who are you surrounding yourself with in order to create that strong foundation for yourself, and what are your non-negotiables when it comes to relationship and beauty and love, and how do you enjoy yourself but then honor your values at the same time. So in contrast to that aspect, something very different that's happening this week is we have the first quarter moon in the sign of Aries, and this is happening on Tuesday the 26th. And so Aries is like, I want it now, I want to act, I want what I want, and I'm going to go get it right now. So very different from Venus Saturn that I just talked about. So you may feel this week like these two kind of like tug of war things where you feel like being more cautious, but then at the same time, you really want what you want and you want it right fucking now. Or you want to do something right now. And so there's this kind of dual energy going on this week. Another part of this week as well that kind of has this duality is we have Mars trining Neptune. And Mars is in the sign of Scorpio right now. And so Mars in Scorpio is like intense wanting to act. Mars is about action, it's about doing and going after what it is that we want. Neptune, in contrast, is about not doing anything. Neptune is about dreams and fantasy and illusion, and typically when Neptune is around, it's best to not act. So what the fuck do we do this week, right? Like there's this feeling of, with all of, like this whole mixture of this week of wanting to be more cautious and maybe not act right away, but then wanting to act and having a certain sense of spontaneous like excitement that's happening on the inside. So I think that we could, look at this a few different ways. I think that it's important to find an outlet for this energy. It is important to act and to do things and to express yourself, but then, just temper, especially with Venus-Saturn, like temper, like what are you committing to? Especially because Venus-Saturn, the conjunction, it's the beginning of a new cycle. So where are you putting your energy and what do you want to grow in the long term? And how can you put your action into things that you're okay with growing in the long term, that you want to grow with the long term versus just like instant gratification that might not be the greatest thing for you. I realize this is the holiday season too, so I mean, you know what's best for you. You can't, I'm not suggesting to like deny yourself gratification. If you want to go out and have fun, if you want to have like all the yummy, amazing foods, totally go to town on that. Like I think this kind of like tempering yourself is more about, it's more relationships, and it's like relationships, values, even like things that you're buying and that kind of thing. So I would just, watch and see how it feels for you. You'll let me know in the comments. So all that being said, I have 3 tips for you to really make the most of this week. So tip number 1 is to embrace what is. So embrace your reality right now. And this is very Venus-Saturn. Even if you are not crazy about what's happening right now, what is actually happening right now, if you can get a certain level of like acceptance around that, that's really going to help you to move forward. Especially since we're wrapping up the end of the year, we're reflecting. I mean, maybe you're reflecting, I don't know. I'm reflecting on like all that's happened this past year and how I feel about it, and accepting like what has actually happened so far and where I'm at right now. So that is tip number 1, to embrace what is your reality right now so that you can move forward. But you got to start right here first. So tip number 2 is to stop and take 3 breaths before you take action. And so this is like if you're making a big decision, if you are especially like gonna buy something or gonna say something to someone that's kind of like you're really amped up about it, take 3 breaths and then act. And so this is very much the first quarter moon in Aries, because Aries does not breathe, does not think before acting. So what I want for you is to temper that a little bit. It is important to act. This week it is important to find a channel for your physical energy, but make sure that you take that moment and just 3 breaths. Even some of you have taken classes with me and done the alternate nostril breathing. That's very helpful too, because it just helps to balance everything out so that we're responding versus reacting. And then before I give you tip number 3, I have a quote that I want to share with you. So this is by Annie Leibovitz. She's a photographer, a portrait photographer, and she is the person that we're featuring on the Feminine Principle podcast this week. She became very well known for the portrait that she took of John Lennon and Yoko Ono the day that he was assassinated. And I love her presence. She's got like a very Venus-Saturn kind of presence. She's very strong and intense, like gritty, but at the same time, she's very like, she has this ethereal quality at the same time and very creative. So she says, "Nature is so powerful, so strong. Capturing its essence is not easy. Your work becomes a dance with the light and weather. It takes you to a place within yourself." And so I love this quote for this week because it really speaks to the power of nature and the indestructible power of nature. And this reminds me of Saturn, that when Saturn is around, we can't argue with reality. We can't argue with material reality. There's a certain element where we can work with things, but at the end of the day, you know, you need a place to live, you need food, you need shelter, and you need people. We need relationships. We need each other. And there's like this element of working with that and putting in the effort, but then also surrendering to the process at the same time. And so that's a key to this week, is that effort, but then surrender. So that being said, I have one last tip for you. I want you to ask yourself, what is your motivation? And I mean that everything that you're doing this week, whether it's a big action or a little action, having a conversation with someone, expressing yourself, what is your motivation? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? And you could get really philosophical on this or not, but I think this is important because we're moving into a new year, and the more that we can be mindful about why we're acting, that is going to create more meaningful experiences. So that is your horoscope for the week. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you did, please share it with a friend, because I like to get these messages out to as many people as possible. And then of course, if you want to get deeper into this astrology, much more than I can on this video, you can listen to the Feminine Principle podcast that I co-host with my friend Mel of Energetic Principles. It's called The Feminine Principle, Astrology for Authentic Living. And it's really fun, and we just chat it out and talk about all the astrology, and we have quotes, and Mel pulls tarot cards and action items and all of these really fun things. So I'll have the link below to iTunes and Podbean and YouTube. You can listen any of those places. And then of course, this is your last chance to get the 2018 Moon Journal that I wrote for before we get into 2018. So I wrote this moon journal that has guidance through all of the lunar cycles for the entire year. So every new moon and every full moon has a description and reflection questions and an action item and places for you to journal and reflect. And thank you so much for all of you who have ordered it and said how much you love it. I appreciate you so much. It makes me so happy to make something and then to have you enjoy it. That is just like, that's amazing for me. So I'm wishing you an amazing year, an amazing holiday season, sending lots of love, and I'll talk to you soon. Namaste.